Alright class, today we are going to be talking about character identification and analysis, and since we just finished Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, we're going to be using it and the characters in it as examples. But before we can do that, there are two things we need to know. The first is, what is characterization? Anyone want to take a guess? And then I pause and let the students guess for a minute or think about it. Well, let's take a look at the definition. Characterization is the creation of the image of a fictional person. Now, in this definition, image is referring to not only how the character looks, but also their reputation and personality. The other thing we need to know about characterization is that it is generated by plot. You can find characterization in several different aspects of a book, in the actions of the book or character, in the speech and thoughts of a character, and of course, in the appearance of a character. The nice thing about characterization is that you start to make assumptions about a character while you're reading it without even knowing it. Then when you look back at examples, you realize that it was really just characterization. Second thing we need to know is, what is character development? Anyone want to take a guess for this one? And again, I pause and let the students guess. It is the changes and growth a character experiences throughout a story. Not all characters will experience it, it just depends on the story and, the different characters. Development can be influenced by a number of things: story changes, moral dilemmas, climax and resolution, and the aging of a character. Now that we know how to analyze them, let's look at the types of characters. First type is a major character. They're the ones that the plot is mostly going to revolve around. They're also going to have the most development. And they're also present in almost every part of the story. Important thing here to remember is that there's a slight difference between a major character and the main character. There can be more than one major character, but generally in every story there's at least one main character. So for now we're focusing on the majors. Next we have the minor characters. This would pretty much include most other characters in the story. They tend to complement the major characters and rarely have their own development. When analyzing characters, it's usually best to pick one or two minor characters and focus on those. Now, let's do a quick activity, and I want you to do some critical thinking. Get out a piece of paper and, on your own, write down as many characters of the book that you can think of. Think about how important each character is, what part they play in the story, and so on. I'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes. After that, pick your top 2 characters that you would identify as the major characters, and we'll do a class vote. And then I give them a couple minutes, and we do a quick class discussion and have 2 students come up and write the votes out on the board. Alright, there really wasn't a right or wrong answer, but for the sake of the lesson, we've settled on Scout and Atticus as being our major characters. Scout because she's the narrator, and Atticus because he influences Scout and the story the most. We're going to look at each of them individually, starting with Scout. I've picked out some key characterization points that we can use to further understand Scout. The first is that she's a tomboy. We can see that from her description of having short hair, wearing pants, always playing outside, etc. What we take away from this is that she's confident in who she is, and she is independent. Even though Aunt Alex is always criticizing her for not being girly enough, Scout is happy with who she is. We also see that she is a fighter, both physically and morally. She gets into fights at school when people talk bad about something she believes in, especially her father. This shows us that she is strong and believes that goodness and truth will win out. It also gives us a sense of her fearlessness. Finally, Scout is characterized through her relationship with Atticus. For one, it shows us that she is more mature for her age. She can hold semi-adult conversations and is already ahead in reading. This also reflects on Atticus and shows us Scout's intelligence. These are all things we learn about Scout through the author's depiction of her. Next, we'll look at the development. Though there is a lot of different development in the story, especially for Scout, there are 2 key points that affect her as a character. The first is Tom's trial. It teaches her that life isn't always fair. At first, she can't understand why, even though Atticus proved he was innocent, Tom was found guilty. Once she comes to terms with it, it sticks with her and almost forces her to grow up a little, causing a serious development in the way she thinks. The second event that affects her is Tom's death. At the time of discovery, Scout is with Aunt Alex, and although she is horrified at the news, Aunt Alex is able to hold herself together and proceeds in a ladylike manner. Scout notices and respects this, and in doing so, realizes that sometimes being a lady and putting a mask on your emotions is a better way to handle things. This development is key in Scout's maturity because as we grow up, we have to learn how to handle our emotions better. As I said before, these are only 2 pieces of many examples of Scout's development throughout the book. We'll get more practice with development later, but for now, let's move on to our next character. This time we're going to be looking at Atticus. Atticus is Scout and Jem's dad, obviously. We know that he's a lawyer, but that in itself is a bit of characterization because it shows us he believes in justice and equality in all parts of life. And though agreeing to defend Tom, it shows us what kind of lawyer he is, which is one that takes the law seriously and actually believes in what he preaches. Another thing we know about Atticus is that he is older than the other dads, both age-wise and also in maturity. He's not as close-minded as most other white men in the town. He's a single parent, but his kids are mature, intelligent, and well-rounded, so it speaks towards his personality that they came out so well. The fact that he has a clear set of rules for the kids and always listens to both sides of the story shows us that he has good morals and believes in hard work. Overall, the main characterization of Atticus comes from Scout's own thoughts about him and things she hears about him, which is, overall, he's a good man and even her own idol. The interesting thing about Atticus is how he develops. It's much more subtle than Scout, and some people argue he doesn't because he is an adult and is supposedly fully developed. This is untrue. You never stop growing, and neither do characters and stories. Atticus's main development comes from his experiences with the Ewells. When we first meet him, Atticus is a bit distant and harsh. He's always fair, but not as caring. After seeing the way Bob Ewell treats his children and how it affects them, Atticus seems to change his tune a little and slowly softens up to the kids. He still has his rules, but by the end of the book, he's gone from being a straight father to being a dad. And though it's hard to see it, it's important to know in order to understand him. Atticus also develops through Tom Robinson's trial and sentencing. Atticus knows that this case will cause a lot of problems, but he still accepts it, going and assuming he can't win. But when he proves Tom's innocence and still loses, Atticus keeps his footing and realizes that he's done all he can do. This shows how Atticus's humbleness has grown. Early in the book, we learn about Atticus and his amazing shooting skills. He's one of the best shots in town, but he refused to boast about it. Though this is modest, it's more of a minor thing, but by refusing to fight the sentence or by being beaten by it, it shows that he's more than modest now. He's humble and accepting. This is only further emphasized when he refuses to fight Bob Ewell, even after he's disgraced him. Atticus knows that he has done everything he needed to, and he succeeded to himself, and therefore nothing else matters. It's interesting how, even though we know from the beginning that Atticus is a good man and a good father, Harper Lee still manages to show us how the character can develop even more. So now that we've covered our main characters, let's talk about our minor characters. Sometimes people argue that they really don't matter, but they do. So as an activity, I want you to partner up, take 2 or 3 minutes, and come up with 3 reasons why you think minor characters are important. Then we'll discuss. And then at this time, I give them a couple of minutes, walk around class, and then do a class discussion. So as a class, we've concluded that the key reasons why minor characters are important are because they help move the plot, they keep the story interesting, and they provide characterization for major characters. Having discussed that, our 2 main characters to focus on are Bob Ewell and Tom Robinson. What you need to remember is that the minor characters don't have much development themselves, so the thing to focus on is their characterization and their actions. We'll start with Bob Ewell. He's the antagonist of the story, the bad guy. He attacks Scout and Atticus, giving them both development. He's the symbol for white trash and everything bad in the South, which gives the major characters something to fight against. His drunken actions affect everyone around him, including both his daughter and Tom Robinson, and through his action, Tom ends up on trial. Now obviously Mayella is the one accusing him, but Bob's influence over her is what sets the emotions into action. Next we have Tom Robinson. Tom is portrayed as the typical black man to the townspeople, when really he is their pawn. He's a victim. His own story and trial provides development for Scout and Atticus and is the basis of Scout's narrative, therefore the basis of the book. His death and the events leading up to it are the biggest factors that affect Scout, though he has no real development on his own. And his attempted escape is a symbol of him finally taking over his own fate, something that really sticks with Atticus. Both Bob and Tom are excellent examples of how a minor character can have a major effect on the story. Alright, so let's do a quick summary. Someone raise their hand and tell me the 2 types of characters. And I would pause and call on the student. Major and minor, correct. Now, can anyone tell me what characterization is? And again, I would call on a student. Exactly. It's what the story tells us about a character. Then we have development, which is how a character changes throughout a story. And finally, we have to remember that to find characterization and development, we can look to the key plot points in a storyline. Also, you have to be able to understand a character to understand a story. Alright, good job guys. Remember to hang on to your notes from today because we will be using them for next week when we start our papers.